Regional leaders are gathered in Thailand for the BIMSTEC summit, which could see a widely speculated meeting taking place between India's Prime Minister and Bangladesh's chief advisor. Thai Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra welcomed her Indian counterpart Narendra Modi with a guard of honour before holding delegation-level talks. A Bangladeshi interim leader, Muhammad Yunus, also present at the Bangkok summit. He took charge of the country last August after India's old ally Sheikh Hasina was ousted. Bilateral ties are under strain with calls for New Delhi to extradite the former leader. Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra set to hold talks with Myanmar's Hlaing on the sidelines of the summit. This does mark a rare foreign trip for the military leader from Myanmar, since he staged a military coup in 2021. It also comes just days after a deadly earthquake in Myanmar. And Saksith joins us live from the summit in Bangkok. And we also have our Myanmar correspondent Leong standing by. Saksith, this summit, in fact, this entire bulletin we've been looking at tariffs, and Southeast Asian countries hit especially hard by these new tariffs from the White House. What are member states, when they meet at the summit, hoping to achieve when they speak to each other?
No, there was no hope that this would not be on the agenda before they organized this summit, but it definitely hit in here very much on the agenda that they were going to talk about these tariffs. And, of these 7 member states of BIMSTEC, more than half of them have tariffs north of 30%. Thailand being one of them. Other countries like Bangladesh and Myanmar hit even harder with tariffs above 40%. So, of course, there is a lot of talks, and we understand there's a lot of talks on the sidelines and behind closed doors about it as well, how to mitigate these circumstances. We have heard early in the program how Thailand wants to do that. They say that they have a plan how they're going to go on about it. They're going to reach out and talk to the United States about it. But then also the BIMSTEC bloc as a whole are going to think about that. Now, one component to that is, for example, that they have signed an agreement about maritime transport, that it could be a component to have more trade within the bloc. There was even a talk, a long-time talk, I might add, about a free trade agreement within this bloc. Thailand itself has always been chasing FTAs with as many countries as possible in order to mitigate these tariffs. But overall, this summit, already has another shadow, and that is the shadow of Myanmar junta leader Min Aung Hlaing that is here, as you mentioned, a very rare visit here to Thailand, which has not been welcomed by some observers. But then on the other hand, it plays into Thailand's approach to Myanmar being the neighbor of that country, being the only ASEAN member of that country. It's a continuation of what we have seen last year with these so-called informal talks that is basically platforming the military government in order to make their pitch to other countries about their so-called election plans. But we also understand that Min Aung Hlaing is also coming here in order to address the situation after the earthquake of last Friday as well. So lots to talk about at this BIMSTEC summit, lots of issues that are not necessarily related to the BIMSTEC summit itself, but definitely something that is on the minds and on the agendas of everybody involved here.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Wykit, let's get you in on this. Hearing Saksith there, north of 30%. In fact, Myanmar's reciprocal tariffs is at 44%. But arguably, Min Aung Hlaing turning up in Bangkok, he doesn't have on his mind exports to the US at this point. He has far more pressing concerns, and this is a chance for him to get out of diplomatic isolation.
Exactly that way, Sue. This crisis turns out to be quite the opportunity for Min Aung Hlaing because his level of diplomatic engagements has increased. There have been phone calls made between Min Aung Hlaing and the Prime Ministers of Malaysia, India, as well as Pakistan. And he also received various messages from numerous world leaders, including from China, Xi Jinping. So he wants to ride on this political momentum. So on the political standpoint, he wants to maximize that. Remember, he wants to seek legitimacy, acceptance, and recognition. But from an economic and strategic cooperation standpoint, given that Myanmar is in its very dire economic state with the tariffs, as you mentioned earlier, not tariffs, but with the tariff slap on Myanmar earlier, all the more it is important for Myanmar to continue cooperation with these BIMSTEC partners. In fact, since the coup, it has been doing just that.
Right, Waikit, part of rejoining the international community is earning legitimacy, as you mentioned, and one of those would be guaranteeing that Myanmar holds elections by the end of this year. The promise before the quake was that he would, in fact, do that. Could he be using the earthquake as a reason to say, well, there's not enough security, we need to push those elections further? What does that mean for Min Aung Hlaing?
I think quite likely this is going to be one scenario because let's face it, even before the earthquake, it's going to be difficult for Myanmar to hold elections logistically as well as geographically. It does not have full control of many parts of Myanmar. So he's likely to ride on this momentum, perhaps to legitimately delay elections and continue holding on to power. But as you've heard Saksith say earlier, Min Aung Hlaing is also likely to talk about his quake plans. In fact, he has asked for a ceasefire for 3 weeks to boost or facilitate aid relief work. My team on the ground has been visiting various parts of Myanmar, including to Sagaing, which is not only a quake hit area, but also a conflict zone. Let's take a look.
Giving thanks and blessings. For these young nuns, it's the one thing they can do to express their gratitude towards rescuers for their relief efforts in their war-torn hometown of Sagaing. Airstrikes hit parts of this region even after it was struck by the devastating earthquake last Friday. Civilians are on edge, though the Myanmar army announced a temporary ceasefire earlier on Wednesday. Our team followed volunteers from Mandalay, one of the worst hit areas by the quake, to Sagaing. Though there are fewer high-rise buildings here in Sagaing compared to Mandalay City, one can still see the impact from the quake. Another observation, there are more armed security presence near the region's checkpoints. Here in a monastery which houses some 70 refugees who fled from civil conflicts, workers are searching for bodies. Residents here say help from outside Sagaing is pouring in. A welcome move given the lack of manpower and proper equipment. The highest number of casualties came from this mosque, as many gathered here for their last Friday prayers for Ramadan, just as the quake struck, killing almost everyone inside. Myanmar's army has called for a 3-week ceasefire in the country's civil war to facilitate recovery efforts. The truce that runs until April 22nd might offer aid workers in Myanmar a brief respite from operating in dangerous conditions. On Wednesday, the junta's troops fired warning shots when a Chinese Red Cross convoy failed to stop while delivering aid to victims in the conflict zone. Some 1,500 rescuers from at least 15 countries are currently carrying out search and rescue operations in Myanmar.
As of now, the death toll in Myanmar stands at more than 3,000.
Thanks to CNA's Leong and Saksith reporting live to us.